Why do you think that Leo Varadkar should resign, Mary Lou McDonald?
Well, good morning, Shane.
Good morning.
And we've been making this case since last November, when the full facts surrounding this leaking of a confidential document, a draft GP contract, which, as your listeners would know, was leaked by Leo Varadkar when he was Taoiseach to a third party who happened to be a friend of his. And more to the point, that person was the head of a rival GP organisation. And we've made the case very firmly in November. We, as you know, we moved to a no confidence motion in the Taoiseach. Unfortunately, the government and some independents chose to support the Taoiseach, then to keep him in his job. And then in January, more information emerged, casting further doubt on the account of events that he had given. But in the midst of the whole saga, what we have seen is a gross abuse of power by Leo Varadkar when he was Taoiseach. I believed in November that his position was untenable. I believe that the Taoiseach should have removed him from his ministerial position. That was our view in November, and that is our view today. Of course, the criminal aspect of this is not for us to call. That's a matter for the National Bureau of Criminal Investigation. They and only they can determine and investigate whether or not there was a crime committed. That's for them, and that's a separate process.
And should we not await that? I mean, should we not await to see? I mean, I think a lot of people looking at it would say, if charges were brought and we don't know if that's going to happen, well, then maybe this is an issue to be addressed.
No, I don't accept that. And let me repeat. The criminal matter of this is for the National Bureau of Criminal Investigation, and their investigation is underway. That's a matter for the Garda. That is not a matter for me to determine whether or not there was a criminal offence.
No, of course it isn't, yeah.
Committed by Leo Varadkar. That's a matter for them. I am not straying into that terrain. I am sticking with what we know, what the Taoiseach has conceded happened on the floor of the Dáil. The matters and the facts are not in dispute. He has acknowledged them. He leaked this document. It was a reckless thing to do.
Not the first politician to leak a document,
Shane,
Mary Lou.
Shane,
come on, let's be realistic about this.
Shane,
has nobody from Sinn Féin and government in the North leaked a document ever to the media?
Shane, this was the Taoiseach. This was the head of government. This was a draft GP contract. This was a document that the health minister couldn't get his hands on. This was a document that the Department of Health said could not be published without the consent or knowledge of the IMO, because it could jeopardise the whole process. Had a civil servant acted in the same way as the head of government, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because that individual would have been sacked.
Some people might say it is it's a little bit talking out of both sides of the mouth for Sinn Féin to call for the resignation of Leo Varadkar, for Leo Varadkar to be sacked, when, for example, Michelle O'Neill was under a PSNI investigation for the Bobby Storey funeral. When Gerry Adams a number of years ago was president of Sinn Féin, he was arrested and questioned in relation to the murder of Jean McConville. And they're saying, well, you know, if you're calling for Leo Varadkar to resign, on that basis, should Michelle O'Neill have stood down pending this PSNI investigation? Should Gerry Adams have stood down pending the investigation into Jean McConville?
I have the gist of that assertion or that question, so let me deal with it in the following way. Firstly, I think I've made it very clear to you, but let me do it again. The criminal element of this and the investigative end of it isn't my business or my affair. That's a matter for the Garda.
Yes, but it did prompt you. It did prompt you to once again call for his resignation. Yes, that story on Sunday.
But for this reason, it underscores the seriousness of what's happened. And just for the purposes of clarity, we moved that no confidence motion in November.
Yeah.
It was not successful, unfortunately. Then in January, when more information came out in relation to this whole saga, the Taoiseach again failed to act. And I am simply saying that we have not changed our position from November. And I think it is astonishing that anybody would try to draw an equivalence between this gross breach of faith, this gross abuse of position by an acting Taoiseach, and any other happening or any other event. There is no equivalence.
I suppose
that
the equivalence, Mary Lou, is waiting for the investigation to run its course. And if that was good enough and legitimately good enough for Michelle O'Neill and Gerry Adams, people are saying, why isn't it good enough for Leo Varadkar?
Well, Shane, we don't have the scope to get into the ins and outs of the arrest of a political leader in the midst of an election campaign and then being released without charge days later. Maybe we can discuss that some other time. I'm saying to you now, by Leo Varadkar's own utterances and admission, the facts here aren't in dispute. The document was leaked. It was leaked to a third party who was a friend of the Taoiseach, then Taoiseach, and who was the head of a rival organisation. Let me repeat again. If anybody else within the system or in any other organisation leaked confidential information at a critical time in a negotiation, if they openly proclaimed that they had done it, action would be taken and they would be held to account for it. And it is beyond the beyonds in the Ireland of 2021 that anybody would defend Leo Varadkar's behaviour. It is the worst form of insider crony politics.
Yeah, he would reject that. He would absolutely reject that. He would reject that. He would said he was making sure that another representative organisation had the facts.
Well, Shane, that
you would say it's the opposite of cronyism.
That cock and bull story has been comprehensively disproven, and he knew. Okay. He knew at the time, or at least should have known, that the objective of the other organisation was not to be helpful to the process, but was to get ahead of the rivals. Okay. And the head of government should not, under any circumstances, have been involved in that. His actions, you see, it might be a thing that Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil for a long time, you know, this is how they act, the insider crony politics. That's over, Shane.